Aliens dropped him on a death world. He built a civilization instead. Marcus Vale opened his eyes to a sky that burned with colors he had never seen before. Jagged mountains rose like broken glass, and strange storms churned clouds into violent shapes that seemed alive. The air was thick and acrid, carrying a metallic taste that made him gag. Pain shot through his body as he realized he was lying on the rocky ground, his clothes torn and his belongings missing. He tried to remember how he had ended up here. The last thing he could recall was being on a research station orbiting a distant planet. Then a bright light had engulfed him, and he had felt his body lifted, twisted, and thrown across space. Now he was here, stranded on a world that seemed designed to kill him. Marcus forced himself to sit up, testing his limbs. Everything hurt, but he was alive. That was something. Survival was the first step, and his mind immediately went into problem-solving mode. He had been trained for emergencies, and this was emergency number 1,000,000. He scanned the area. The ground was cracked, jagged, and almost impossibly hot in places. Giant spires of rock jutted out like teeth. In the distance, he saw a forest of strange, purple trees swaying in the wind, though there was no breeze. He knew instinctively that those trees were probably dangerous. He stumbled forward, each step painful, trying to find water. The planet's surface was littered with strange fossils, bones of creatures that looked terrifyingly alien. He nearly tripped over a skull with multiple eye sockets and a set of jagged teeth. Even the dead here looked deadly. His stomach growled. Hunger added urgency to his already desperate situation. Marcus had to find shelter first. He remembered that the alien races had left behind some scattered technology, some small pieces of equipment that could be useful. He scanned the ground, noticing a half-buried metal container. He pried it open with his hands, cutting himself in the process. Inside, he found basic survival supplies, a small water filtration unit, some food packets, and a multi-tool. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him a chance. He carried the container to the base of a rocky outcrop. The rocks formed a small overhang, barely enough to shield him from the rain that fell almost immediately. The rain was thick and acidic, sizzling when it hit the ground. Marcus set up the water filtration unit and drank carefully, the water tasting faintly metallic but safe. He ate some of the food packets, trying not to think about how long they would last. He needed energy to survive. That night, he barely slept. The sounds of the planet were terrifying. Howls echoed from the forests, and he caught glimpses of glowing eyes in the distance. The temperature dropped sharply, and the winds threatened to throw him off the ledge he had claimed. Marcus shivered, but he refused to give in to panic. Survival depended on control. He checked the multi-tool, making notes of what he could use to fashion weapons or traps. Even if the planet wanted him dead, he would not give it the satisfaction. The next day, Marcus began exploring cautiously. He needed resources, materials, and perhaps a better place to set up a base. As he moved through the jagged landscape, he noticed strange, glowing crystals embedded in the rocks. He touched one and felt a faint vibration through his hand. Curious and cautious, he pried a small piece free. The crystal was surprisingly light and seemed to store energy. He pocketed it, thinking it might be useful later. As he moved closer to the forest, he realized that the creatures were not just predators, they were intelligent. He observed a pack of quadrupeds communicating through gestures and sounds, coordinating their movements as they hunted smaller animals. Marcus understood then that this planet had life that could be studied, perhaps even tamed or persuaded. It was not just survival anymore, it was a challenge to master the environment. Days passed. Marcus scavenged, experimented, and learned. He figured out which plants were edible and which were poisonous. He built a small fire using friction and dry materials, discovering that heat was both survival and protection. Each night, he added to his crude shelter, reinforcing it with rocks and metal fragments he found scattered across the landscape. The acidic rain forced him to innovate. He carved channels in the rock to divert water and built a makeshift canopy from jagged metal sheets. One morning, as he explored farther from his shelter, he stumbled upon ruins, ancient, crumbling structures, partially buried in ash and sand. They were covered in strange symbols, and although the buildings were broken, Marcus could see the intelligence that had built them. This civilization had thrived here long ago, proving that life could exist on this death world. A spark of hope ignited within him. Marcus spent weeks examining the ruins, learning from their technology and salvaging materials. He discovered a half-functional energy generator, ancient tools, and containers filled with preserved food. Most importantly, he found diagrams, schematics that suggested the civilization had attempted to control the environment, protect themselves from the deadly weather, and cultivate life. If they could do it once, maybe he could too. With the schematics, Marcus built his first real structure, a small, reinforced shelter with a filtration system for water and air. He experimented with growing plants inside, using soil from the ruins mixed with his own improvised fertilizers. At first, nothing survived. Then slowly, seedlings sprouted, and Marcus felt a thrill he had not felt since he was a child. Life was possible here. He realized he could manipulate small areas of the planet, creating zones where plants and animals could survive. It was risky. The storms could destroy everything in minutes. The predators could pick off his food supply, but the potential outweighed the danger. Marcus became more than a survivor. He was an engineer of life itself. One evening, after weeks of work, Marcus noticed movement near his shelter. A small creature emerged from the forest, bipedal, covered in fur with glowing eyes. It watched him cautiously. Marcus froze, understanding that making the wrong move could mean death. He stayed still, then slowly placed some food on the ground. The creature sniffed, hesitated, and then ate. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. The next day, more creatures appeared. They seemed intelligent, communicating with each other through gestures and sounds. Marcus realized they could learn. He began experimenting, teaching them simple tasks, moving objects, fetching food, avoiding danger. Slowly, he gained their trust. They were not human, but they were capable of forming bonds. Marcus had allies. Weeks turned into months. Marcus's shelter expanded into a small complex. He built walls, energy shields, and basic devices that harnessed wind and sunlight. He had discovered a way to store energy in the crystals he had found earlier, creating a rudimentary power system. The plants he cultivated were thriving, and the alien creatures he tamed were helping him. Despite all this, he never forgot the dangers. Storms could still wipe out his work. Predators still lurked beyond the safe zones, and the planet itself was unpredictable. But Marcus thrived on challenge. Each day was a puzzle, each obstacle a test of his intelligence and willpower. He began keeping a journal, documenting experiments, successes, and failures. His mind worked constantly, planning for the next innovation, the next defense, the next improvement. One night, as he lay under the strange sky, listening to the storms and the distant howls, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. He was alone in the galaxy on a planet designed to destroy him. Yet, against all odds, he had survived. He had not just survived, he had adapted, learned, and begun to shape the world around him. Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The planet would test him endlessly, but he had proven something crucial. Human ingenuity, courage, and determination could overcome even the most hostile environments. He was no longer just a man stranded on a death world. He was a pioneer, a builder, a leader in a land where life had once been impossible. And deep inside, Marcus smiled. If he could survive here, if he could master this world, then perhaps he could build something extraordinary. Something that would outlast storms, predators, and even himself. The thought filled him with hope and resolve. This death world would no longer define him. He would define it. Marcus drifted into a light sleep, the stars above strange but beautiful, the wind howling through the jagged mountains. Tomorrow he would explore further. Tomorrow he would experiment with the ruins again. Tomorrow he would take another step toward turning survival into civilization. For now he was alive. For now he had a purpose. And that was enough. Marcus woke to the faint light of Zythera's twin suns peeking over jagged mountains. The air was still thick with the planet's sharp metallic tang, but he was used to it now. Months had passed since he had been stranded here, and the barren, dangerous world that had once threatened to kill him now felt like a canvas, a place where he could shape life itself. He stepped out of his shelter, checking the small gardens he had cultivated. Green shoots peeked from the soil, delicate and fragile in the harsh environment. Each plant was a small victory, proof that survival was possible. The alien creatures he had begun to trust scurried around, helping in their own curious way, fetching soil or nudging rocks into place. Marcus smiled. He was no longer alone. He had allies even if they were not human. Today he had a new goal. Survival was no longer enough. He wanted to build a community, to expand beyond a single shelter and small garden. The ruins he had discovered weeks ago had shown him that intelligent life could thrive here before. If they had done it, why not him? And if he could teach the alien creatures some of the skills he had learned, perhaps they could form the first steps of a civilization. Marcus started by organizing the creatures. They were intelligent enough to understand patterns and consequences. He devised simple tasks, moving stones to reinforce shelter walls, collecting edible plants from nearby areas, and helping him tend the garden. At first, progress was slow. The creatures were hesitant, sometimes aggressive and sometimes scared, but Marcus was patient. He used gestures, tones, and careful repetition to teach them. He realized quickly that they were not just mindless animals. They observed and learned quickly. One of the smaller ones, which he called Tico, seemed especially clever. Tico learned to carry water from a nearby stream to the garden, even building a small channel to make the process easier. Marcus watched with fascination. If he could train one of them, he could train more. He began to see patterns in their intelligence, noticing how they cooperated, how they communicated, and how they solved small problems without prompting. By the third week, Marcus had set up a basic system. The creatures understood specific signals. A raised hand meant stop, a tapping on the ground meant gather here, and a whistle indicated danger. He had effectively created a cooperative workforce. Marcus felt a thrill of accomplishment. For the first time since being dropped on Zythera, he felt like he could not only survive but shape life in a meaningful way. But life on Zythera was never easy. One evening, as Marcus was checking the water channels, a storm rolled in from the north. It was violent, with winds that could topple trees and rain that burned when it hit bare skin. He rushed to the shelter, gathering his alien allies as he ran. Together, they huddled inside, protecting the fragile garden with improvised shields made from metal scraps and rocks. The storm lasted hours, tearing away part of his roof and flattening several young plants. Marcus did not despair. Instead, he studied the damage and adapted. He reinforced the shelter, creating angled barriers that could deflect rain and wind. He devised a network of trenches and channels to direct the storm's water away from his plants. The alien creatures helped, dragging rocks into place and following his directions. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a battered but intact garden. Marcus smiled. Survival was one thing, but engineering solutions to impossible problems was another. He was learning, and his companions were learning too. In the following weeks, Marcus expanded his operations. He built additional shelters using metal scraps from the ruins, reinforced with rocks and mud. He planted more gardens, experimenting with which plants could survive the harsh conditions. He even started cultivating simple crops that could sustain the alien creatures and himself. For the first time, he had a small, self-sufficient system, a primitive society with him as the leader and the creatures as helpers and companions. As the community grew, Marcus faced another challenge: communication. The creatures were intelligent but could not speak human language. Marcus had to develop a system of gestures, sounds, and visual cues that they could understand. It took weeks of trial and error, but eventually they began responding reliably to his commands. They even started initiating actions on their own, like gathering food before he could ask, or alerting him to predators approaching the settlement. It was a small but significant step toward cooperation and mutual respect. One day, while exploring near the ruins, Marcus discovered evidence of old technology that had not been touched in centuries. It was partially functional, a generator that still produced a small amount of energy. Marcus spent days repairing it, using parts scavenged from the ruins and his own tools. When he finally activated it, a soft hum filled the air. Lights flickered on, powered by the small generator, illuminating his shelter and gardens. The creatures stared in awe. Marcus laughed quietly. Energy, light, and power, small victories, but ones that could change the future of his fledgling civilization. Encouraged by these successes, Marcus began building tools and machines that would help his community grow. He crafted simple irrigation systems, wind-driven pumps, and crude wind turbines to store energy in the glowing crystals he had discovered earlier. The alien creatures learned quickly, observing and assisting. Together, they built defenses against predators, simple walls and traps that could protect the gardens and shelters. Marcus felt a deep satisfaction. Every day, his vision of a functioning society on a death world became more real. Despite his progress, danger was never far away. The forests surrounding the settlement were filled with predators, creatures with sharp claws and glowing eyes that moved silently. Marcus had to patrol constantly, setting traps and teaching his allies to respond to threats. One night, a large predator attacked the garden, drawn by the smell of food. Marcus and his companions worked together, using fire, traps, and careful coordination to drive it away. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. Marcus realized that adversity forced innovation. Each threat he faced made his civilization stronger. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus's community began to stabilize. The alien creatures were no longer merely helpers, they were partners. They learned to recognize danger, gather food, and maintain the shelter. Marcus even began experimenting with simple forms of entertainment, teaching them games that encouraged cooperation and strategy. It was not just survival anymore, it was culture. One morning, Marcus noticed movement in the distance. A second group of creatures, slightly larger and more cautious than the first, approached the settlement. They were initially hesitant, keeping their distance and observing silently. Marcus understood that this was a critical moment. He needed to demonstrate that the settlement was safe and that cooperation was possible. He prepared food, arranged safe spaces, and extended gestures of peace. Slowly, the second group approached. At first, they watched, hesitant and alert. Then one brave creature stepped forward and accepted food from Marcus's hand. Others followed. By the end of the day, the second group had integrated into the settlement. Marcus had effectively expanded his community, demonstrating that even on a death world, cooperation and trust could build society. With the growing population, Marcus began to consider long-term planning. Food production had to increase. Shelters needed to be fortified. Resources from the ruins had to be managed carefully. He devised schedules for water collection, food cultivation, and maintenance tasks, teaching his alien companions to follow routines and coordinate work. Slowly, the settlement began to resemble a functioning society, with Marcus at the center as the organizer and teacher. One evening, Marcus reflected on how far they had come. From a lone survivor struggling to find water, he now led a small, cooperative community that had survived storms, predators, and scarce resources. The alien creatures had become loyal allies, intelligent partners in the daily struggle to thrive. Marcus felt pride, but also a deep sense of responsibility. Every action he took could affect the lives of those around him. Civilization was fragile, and he knew it. He also began thinking about the future. If this small settlement could thrive, perhaps larger projects were possible. Could he expand beyond the current safe zone? Could he teach more creatures, discover new plants, and harness more of the planet's resources? The thought filled him with excitement. Marcus was no longer merely surviving on Zythra. He was building the foundations of a civilization that could grow, adapt, and endure. The months continued, each day bringing new challenges and new victories. Marcus experimented with advanced techniques, combining alien technology with human ingenuity. He built more shelters, expanded gardens, and refined irrigation and energy systems. He trained his alien companions in more complex tasks, creating teams that could work independently while still following his guidance. The settlement became a living, evolving organism, adapting to the harsh environment with intelligence, strategy, and cooperation. By the end of Part 2, Marcus had achieved something extraordinary. He had transformed a death world into a place where life could survive, where intelligence could flourish, and where cooperation between species could create something far greater than the sum of its parts. He had laid the foundation for a society that could grow, learn, and perhaps even thrive for generations to come. Marcus stood on a rocky ledge overlooking the settlement he had built. Gardens flourished below, shelters gleamed with light from stored energy, and alien creatures moved about purposefully, working and playing together. The storms of Zythera still raged in the distance, and the predators still lurked, but the settlement had survived and adapted. Marcus smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. He knew that the journey had only begun. The planet would continue to challenge him, and the settlement would face threats and obstacles. But for the first time, Marcus truly believed in the power of human ingenuity, determination, and leadership. Even on a death world, life could thrive. Civilization could rise. And he, Marcus Vale, was the one to make it happen. Marcus Vale stood atop a rocky ridge, watching the settlement he had built flourish under the twin suns of Zythera. The gardens below swayed with healthy green plants, the shelters gleamed in the sunlight, and his alien companions moved with purpose, tending to their tasks. Months of work had transformed the once dead landscape into a living, breathing community. Yet Marcus knew that survival on this planet was never guaranteed. Nature had a way of testing even the strongest resolve. That morning, a low rumble shook the ground. Marcus froze, scanning the horizon. In the distance, a massive storm was forming, unlike any he had seen before. The clouds twisted violently, carrying flashes of green lightning and sheets of acidic rain. The wind tore across the mountains, bending the jagged rock spires almost to breaking. Marcus felt a surge of urgency. He had prepared for storms before, but this one was far more dangerous. He ran down to the settlement, calling his alien companions to action. They responded immediately, moving with precision and efficiency. Marcus coordinated teams to reinforce shelters, secure the gardens, and construct temporary barriers. He activated energy shields powered by the crystal cores he had discovered, sending a faint hum of protection across the settlement. Time was short, and every second counted. The storm hit with a violent roar. Rain burned as it struck the ground, and the wind howled like a living creature. Marcus moved through the chaos, directing his companions with calm authority. Together, they managed to shield the gardens, secure the shelters, and prevent the small water reservoirs from being contaminated. Several of the alien creatures were injured, but Marcus treated them quickly, using basic first aid and improvised medicine from the plants he had cultivated. By the time the storm passed, much of the settlement had survived, though several shelters were damaged and parts of the garden were destroyed. Marcus stood among the wreckage, exhausted but determined. Each setback was a lesson, each failure an opportunity to improve. He immediately began assessing the damage, organizing repairs, and planning ways to prevent future destruction. Zythra was harsh, but Marcus was learning to master it, one challenge at a time. In the following days, Marcus focused on strengthening the settlement. He built stronger walls, reinforced roofs, and created drainage systems to handle heavy storms. He experimented with the alien crystals, discovering that they could store and release energy to stabilize structures during violent weather. The alien creatures worked tirelessly alongside him, moving rocks, repairing shelters, and even helping construct new defensive systems. Marcus realized that he had not only taught them skills, they had adopted a sense of responsibility and initiative. As the settlement became more resilient, Marcus faced another challenge: internal conflict. The alien creatures, though cooperative, were not uniform in thought or temperament. Some were cautious and hesitant, preferring to stick to old habits. Others were ambitious and curious, eager to explore and innovate. Disagreements arose over tasks, priorities, and even territory within the settlement. Marcus realized that leadership required more than directing work. It required mediation, fairness, and understanding. He began holding small councils, using gestures, visual aids, and sounds to communicate ideas and resolve disputes. It was slow and challenging, but gradually the creatures learned the importance of compromise and collaboration. Marcus smiled as he observed them working together, making decisions as a group, and following plans they had helped create. Civilization was not just about survival, it was about community, cooperation, and shared purpose. One morning, while surveying the perimeter, Marcus noticed an unusual phenomenon. A ship appeared in the sky, moving with deliberate precision. It was unlike any craft he had seen before, sleek and metallic, emitting a faint hum of energy. His heart skipped a beat. The aliens who had originally dropped him on Zythra were returning. Marcus's mind raced. Were they here to retrieve him, study him, punish him? He watched as the ship descended carefully, avoiding direct contact with the settlement. Marcus had no choice but to approach with caution. The alien overseers emerged, tall, slender beings with elongated limbs, their skin a shimmering metallic hue. They observed him and the settlement silently, their expressions unreadable. Marcus took a deep breath. He had faced storms, predators, and hostile terrain. He could face these beings too. "Greetings," he said aloud, knowing they might understand the tone and cadence if not the words. He gestured to the settlement, showing the thriving gardens, the shelters, and the alien companions working in harmony. The overseer studied him for a long moment, then made a series of sounds that reverberated in the air. Marcus listened carefully, recognizing patterns and rhythms. It was not speech as humans knew it, but there was meaning, curiosity, assessment, and perhaps disbelief. Over the next several hours, Marcus demonstrated the capabilities of his settlement. He showed them the irrigation systems, the energy shields, and the cooperative alien workforce. The overseers observed silently, occasionally touching objects, scanning structures, and recording data. Marcus explained, using gestures and drawings, how he had learned from the ancient ruins, harnessed alien technology, and trained the creatures. To his surprise, the overseers did not react with hostility. Instead, they seemed intrigued. Marcus realized that they were evaluating his abilities, not punishing him, not retrieving him. They were witnessing human ingenuity in action. For the first time since arriving on Zythra, Marcus felt a surge of pride. Against all odds, he had turned a death world into a place where life could thrive, and the beings who had abandoned him were acknowledging it. But the overseer's presence brought new challenges. Their arrival attracted the attention of predators from the surrounding forests. Larger, more aggressive creatures began probing the settlement's boundaries, drawn by the unusual activity. Marcus had to act quickly. He organized defensive teams, set traps, and used energy shields to protect the gardens and shelters. The alien companions responded instinctively, coordinating with Marcus to repel the threats. During the first encounter, a massive predator attempted to breach the garden wall. Marcus directed the defense, using fire, barriers, and the crystal energy shields to drive it back. One of the overseers observed closely, seemingly analyzing Marcus's tactics. After the predator was repelled, Marcus noticed a subtle nod from one of them. It was not approval in a human sense, but recognition, acknowledgement that he was capable, clever, and adaptable. The overseers remained for several cycles of Zythera's twin sons, observing and documenting Marcus's methods. They did not interfere directly, but their presence altered the dynamics of the settlement. The alien creatures became more cautious, yet also more determined, perhaps sensing the importance of the moment. Marcus continued to lead, balancing his attention between survival, construction, and diplomacy with the overseers. One evening, as Marcus worked repairing a damaged shelter, a discussion arose among the alien companions. Some wanted to explore further into the forest, seeking new resources and potential allies. Others feared leaving the safety of the settlement, wary of predators and the planet's harsh conditions. Marcus realized that leadership required trust and guidance, not just orders. He called the group together and demonstrated the principles of cautious exploration, how to scout safely, identify threats, and return with resources. Slowly, the companions learned to balance curiosity with caution. Civilization required not only survival but wisdom. In the following weeks, Marcus and his companions expanded the settlement. They built new shelters, cultivated additional gardens, and constructed lookout towers to monitor the surrounding terrain. The energy shields were strengthened, and new channels were dug to manage water flow. Marcus experimented with primitive communication networks, using light signals and sounds to coordinate tasks over long distances. The alien overseers continued to watch, their interest growing as the settlement became more complex and resilient. Marcus also took time to train the companions in advanced skills. They learned to repair machinery, manage food storage, and maintain defensive structures. He introduced basic engineering principles, using the ruins as teaching tools. Slowly, the alien creatures were developing a shared knowledge base, a culture of learning and adaptation. Marcus smiled as he watched them experiment and innovate, sometimes making mistakes, sometimes succeeding spectacularly. This was not just survival, it was education, culture, and growth, but Zythera remained unforgiving. One night, a massive predator broke through the outer perimeter, drawn by the scent of food. Marcus and his companions fought tirelessly, using all their skills, traps, and defenses. The battle was intense, but together they prevailed. The experience reinforced Marcus's belief that cooperation and intelligence were humanity's greatest strengths. Even on a death world, the combination of courage, strategy, and collaboration could overcome almost any challenge. By the end of Part 3, Marcus had achieved something remarkable. He had survived multiple storms, repelled predators, trained intelligent alien companions, and gained the attention of the alien overseers who had once abandoned him. His settlement was no longer a fragile experiment. It was a thriving, functioning society, capable of defending itself, producing food and growing knowledge. Marcus understood that civilization was not simply about surviving nature. It was about learning from it, mastering it, and creating systems that could endure. He stood once more on the rocky ridge, looking down at the settlement. The gardens were green, the shelters sturdy, and the companions working together with purpose. In the distance, the overseers observed silently, their presence both intimidating and affirming. Marcus felt a deep sense of pride and determination. He had turned a death world into a home, a place of growth, cooperation, and resilience. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges. There would be storms, predators, and perhaps new conflicts among the companions, but Marcus was ready. He had learned to adapt, to teach, and to lead. Civilization was fragile, but it was possible, even here, on a world designed to kill. Marcus clenched his fists, feeling the surge of human determination. Against impossible odds, he had proven that ingenuity, courage, and leadership could overcome nature itself. Scythera was no longer just a death world. It was a proving ground, a laboratory, and a home. And Marcus Vale was its pioneer, its teacher, and its protector. Marcus Vale stood at the edge of the settlement, gazing across the growing fields of green that now stretched farther than they had ever done. The alien creatures he had trained moved with purpose, tending to the gardens, maintaining shelters, and patrolling the perimeter. Scythera's twin suns shone down, casting long shadows across the land, and Marcus felt a sense of calm, mixed with determination. The settlement was no longer just a place to survive, it was becoming a civilization. Over the past cycles, Marcus had experimented with combining alien technology and human ingenuity. The energy crystals he had discovered were now powering wind-driven generators, providing light and heat during the nights when the twin suns dipped below the jagged horizon. Water filtration systems ensured that clean water flowed through the settlement even after storms. Marcus had also begun experimenting with crop rotation, using soil from different parts of the planet to cultivate more resilient plants. Each improvement strengthened the settlement, making it more self-sufficient and resilient. One morning, Marcus called his companions together. The small council had grown more sophisticated. The alien creatures now contributed ideas and suggestions through gestures and sounds that Marcus had learned to interpret. Today, he was introducing a new project: expansion. The settlement was thriving, but he knew that growth was essential to survival. They needed more gardens, more shelters, and new defensive outposts. The creatures listened carefully, some tilting their heads in curiosity, others nodding as if understanding. Marcus led them to the outskirts of the current settlement, pointing to a flat plain where sunlight was abundant and predators were scarce. He demonstrated how to clear rocks, plant seeds, and construct simple shelters. Within days, the new area began to take shape. The companions worked tirelessly, learning to coordinate, follow schedules, and communicate efficiently. Marcus realized that organization and planning were just as important as survival skills. As the settlement expanded, Marcus also focused on education and culture. He taught the companions not only practical skills, engineering, farming, and defense, but also problem-solving, strategy, and even games that encouraged teamwork and creativity. The alien creatures thrived under his guidance, showing remarkable intelligence. Some even began experimenting on their own, modifying simple tools or devising new ways to store water and food. Marcus smiled. Civilization was no longer just a structure or a community. It was innovation and culture in action. One day, while exploring further from the settlement, Marcus discovered a small, hidden valley. The area was protected by rocky ridges and had a natural stream flowing through it. He realized it was an ideal site for a secondary settlement, a place to grow additional crops, experiment with new plants, and perhaps shelter more companions. He returned to the main settlement and presented the idea to the council. The companions reacted with excitement, eager to expand their territory and explore. Marcus coordinated teams to transport materials, build shelters, and cultivate the land. Within weeks, the valley was transformed into a thriving outpost. With expansion underway, Marcus turned his attention to technology and innovation. He had learned from the ancient ruins that the planet once hosted intelligent civilizations, and he sought to replicate and improve their methods. Using the energy crystals and salvaged machinery, he developed small machines to automate irrigation, grind grains, and store energy efficiently. The alien companions quickly learned to operate the devices, even improving some of them with modifications Marcus had not considered. The settlement was becoming self-sustaining, a complex system of interdependent structures, technologies, and beings working in harmony. As the settlement flourished, Marcus also realized the importance of defense and security. Predators continued to roam the surrounding forests, and storms remained unpredictable. He designed lookout towers equipped with simple warning systems, using lights and sounds to signal approaching danger. The companions learned to respond quickly to alerts, forming defense teams that could deploy traps, barriers, and energy shields. The system worked remarkably well. When a pack of predators approached, they were quickly deterred without loss of life. Marcus understood that a civilization could only thrive if it was prepared for threats while remaining adaptable. One evening, as Marcus inspected the new valley settlement, the sky changed. A large ship descended from orbit, sleek and glowing, its hull reflecting Zythera's twin suns. Marcus's heart raced. These were no ordinary visitors. They were beings from beyond the stars, drawn to the settlement by the activity and the visible signs of civilization. He quickly gathered his companions, ensuring that defensive teams were ready, but also that the visitors could be received peacefully. The ship landed carefully at a safe distance. Figures emerged, humanoid but with features unfamiliar to Marcus, elongated limbs, reflective eyes, and a presence that radiated intelligence. Marcus stepped forward, raising his hands in greeting. The beings observed silently, scanning the settlement with curiosity. Marcus gestured toward the thriving gardens, the energy systems, and the bustling alien companions. He demonstrated, as best he could, the work they had done to survive and thrive on this death world. The visitors communicated with Marcus through a combination of sounds, gestures, and energy pulses. It was a complex language, but Marcus had learned to interpret patterns and meaning. They were incredulous yet fascinated, clearly impressed that a single human had built a functional civilization in such a hostile environment. Marcus explained, using diagrams and demonstrations, how he had adapted alien technology, trained intelligent creatures, and created self-sustaining systems. The visitors watched attentively, their interest growing with each demonstration. Over the next several days, the visitors explored the settlement, observing how the communities functioned. Marcus introduced them to the energy systems, showing how the crystals stored and released power. He demonstrated the irrigation and food cultivation methods, explaining crop rotation and soil enrichment techniques. The alien companions assisted in every demonstration, showing their skills, intelligence, and cooperation. The visitors were impressed, recording data and occasionally nodding or emitting approving sounds. Marcus realized that this attention brought new opportunities and challenges. Other species from the galaxy could now become aware of the settlement, and with attention came both allies and potential threats. He began planning for controlled expansion, teaching the companions to establish boundaries, identify safe resources, and maintain order. Civilization required not just survival but management, foresight, and strategy. As the weeks passed, Marcus introduced advanced technologies. He designed wind-powered energy grids, water distribution networks, and simple communication devices to link the main settlement with the valley outpost. The alien companions learned quickly, demonstrating creativity and problem-solving. Some developed new methods to improve energy storage or reinforce shelters, showing that intelligence could flourish in cooperation across species. Marcus encouraged this, emphasizing that innovation was the heart of civilization. During one cycle, a natural disaster struck, a series of earthquakes caused by shifting tectonic plates. Several buildings were damaged, water channels disrupted, and gardens partially destroyed. Marcus acted quickly, coordinating rescue efforts, repairs, and reinforcement of structures. The alien companions responded efficiently, applying the skills they had learned over months of training. Within days, the settlement recovered, stronger and more resilient than before. Marcus reflected on the lesson. Civilization was not about avoiding danger, but about adapting and improving in the face of it. Marcus also focused on education and culture. He taught the companions to record observations, develop simple maps, and share knowledge with newcomers. They learned about seasons, weather patterns, and the behavior of predators. Marcus encouraged art and creativity, using natural pigments to paint symbols and diagrams that conveyed information and stories. The settlement was becoming not only a functional society but a cultural hub, a place where learning, cooperation, and creativity thrived. As the settlement continued to grow, Marcus noticed another sign of progress. The alien overseers who had once abandoned him now returned periodically, observing from orbit. They no longer interfered but recorded, studying the settlement as if it were a living experiment in human ingenuity. Marcus did not fear them anymore. He had proven, through months of work, storms survived, predators repelled, and civilizations built, that humanity could adapt, innovate, and thrive in impossible conditions. Marcus stood atop the highest ridge, looking across the twin settlements, the flourishing gardens, and the bustling alien companions. The valley outpost connected to the main settlement by clear paths, energy lines, and communication signals. The civilization was expanding, and Marcus knew it could continue to grow. He felt pride, not just in what he had built, but in what he had inspired. Intelligence, cooperation, and hope in a world that had once seemed impossible. He reflected on the journey so far. From a lone survivor struggling to find water and shelter, he had become a leader, teacher, and innovator. He had turned a death world into a place of life, learning, and growth. The alien companions had become skilled allies, capable of independent thought and creativity. The settlement was not just surviving, it was thriving. Civilization had begun, and the possibilities were endless. Marcus smiled as he watched the alien visitors depart, their ships disappearing into the stars. Their curiosity and approval had opened the door to a larger future. He knew that soon other species would come, some to learn, others perhaps to challenge the settlement. But Marcus was ready. He had built more than shelters and gardens. He had built a community, a culture, and a system capable of growth. Civilization on Zythera was no longer just a dream, it was reality. The twin suns set, casting long shadows across the settlements. Marcus walked among the alien companions, checking on the gardens, shelters, and energy systems. Each step was a reminder of the months of work, the lessons learned, and the lives nurtured. Tomorrow, new projects would begin. New ideas would be tested. New challenges would arise. But Marcus was no longer just a survivor. He was a builder of civilizations, a teacher of intelligence, and a pioneer of life itself. And deep in his heart, Marcus knew that Zythera was no longer a death world. It was a place where human ingenuity, determination, and cooperation could thrive, a testament to what humanity could achieve against impossible odds. Marcus Vale stood at the edge of the central settlement, watching the alien companions move through the gardens, maintain shelters, and coordinate their work with a precision and efficiency that amazed him. The settlement had grown far beyond what he had imagined when he first woke on Zythera, a barren, hostile world that seemed determined to kill him. Now, months of labor, planning, and teaching had created something extraordinary, a thriving civilization built from nothing. The twin suns hung high in the sky, casting golden light across the cultivated fields and shining off the energy crystals embedded in structures throughout the settlement. Marcus felt a sense of pride, but also responsibility. Civilization was fragile, and Zythra was still a dangerous world. Storms raged unpredictably, predators roamed the forests, and unknown threats lurked in the distance. Yet, he also knew that every challenge they had faced had strengthened the community. They were no longer merely surviving, they were thriving. Marcus walked among the alien companions, checking on the progress of new projects. A small team was building a second energy grid to connect the valley outpost with the main settlement, ensuring a steady supply of power. Others were planting new crops, experimenting with combinations of soil, water, and sunlight to produce more resilient and nutritious plants. He marveled at how quickly they had learned, adapting human techniques to their own unique abilities. Civilization, Marcus realized, was not just about structures or technology. It was about knowledge, cooperation, and adaptation. News of the settlement had begun to spread. Explorers from nearby systems, drawn by the unusual activity on Zythra, were beginning to arrive in orbit. Marcus had prepared for this moment. He had constructed observation posts, trained his companions in diplomacy, and developed signals to communicate with visitors. He wanted to ensure that new arrivals would see a civilization, not just a scattered settlement, and that they would understand the principles of cooperation, ingenuity, and adaptation that Marcus had instilled. The first group of visitors landed carefully on a flat plateau near the central settlement. They were humanoid, but with differences that marked them as an alien species: elongated limbs, reflective eyes, and subtle bioluminescent patterns on their skin. Marcus approached, stepping forward with confidence. His companions gathered behind him, ready to assist, defend, or demonstrate their skills if necessary. Marcus began by showing them the gardens and energy systems, explaining, through gestures, symbols, and the limited shared language, how the settlement functioned. The visitors observed quietly, clearly impressed by the coordination, technology, and ingenuity on display. Marcus demonstrated the irrigation systems, energy grids, and defensive barriers, and the alien companions participated fully, showing their intelligence and cooperation. The visitors recorded everything, occasionally emitting sounds that Marcus interpreted as approval or curiosity. Over several cycles, more visitors arrived from different systems. Marcus took every opportunity to demonstrate the principles of civilization he had established. He taught the importance of cooperation, the benefits of shared knowledge, and the value of adapting to environmental challenges. The alien companions had become adept teachers themselves, explaining techniques and demonstrating skills to newcomers. Marcus watched with pride as his teachings multiplied through the actions of his companions, spreading knowledge and culture far beyond his direct influence. But with recognition came challenges. Not all visitors were friendly. Some were curious predators, testing the settlement's defenses. Marcus had to balance diplomacy with protection. He developed defensive protocols, trained his companions in strategy, and built advanced traps and energy barriers to ensure safety without unnecessary conflict. Civilization, Marcus realized, required both wisdom and vigilance. Meanwhile, Marcus turned his attention to long-term sustainability. He expanded agricultural systems, introduced crop rotation techniques, and experimented with hybrid plants that combined resilience with nutrition. He improved energy storage, using the alien crystals in more sophisticated arrays to power shelters, communication devices, and defensive systems. He also began documenting everything systematically, creating a knowledge archive that could be shared with future settlers or allies. Civilization was not just about the present, it was about legacy. One cycle, a massive storm approached, larger than any before. Marcus coordinated preparations, reinforcing shelters, securing energy systems, and moving resources to protected areas. He assigned teams of companions to patrol the perimeter, monitor water flow, and guard crops. When the storm arrived, it raged violently, battering the settlement with acidic rain, strong winds, and lightning. Yet the preparation paid off. Damage was minimal, and the crops and structures survived largely intact. Marcus watched the storm from a protected ridge, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. The settlement had endured, strengthened by every trial it faced. As the days passed, Marcus focused on education and governance. He established councils with representatives from different groups of alien companions, teaching them to make decisions, solve disputes, and manage resources. These councils began handling local issues independently, reporting to Marcus on matters that required higher-level planning. Civilization was no longer just about survival. It was about order, culture, and shared responsibility. The alien overseers who had once abandoned him appeared again in orbit, observing silently. Marcus no longer feared them. Instead, he welcomed their scrutiny. They watched the settlement with clear interest, recording data, scanning structures, and analyzing the coordination among human and alien participants. Marcus demonstrated innovations, problem-solving techniques, and education systems, confident that they were witnessing the success of human ingenuity and leadership. One evening, Marcus convened a meeting at the central plaza. The settlement had grown into a bustling hub of activity, with multiple garden zones, residential shelters, energy stations, and lookout towers. He addressed his companions, gesturing broadly, expressing gratitude and pride. They responded with gestures, sounds, and displays of energy, a complex language of acknowledgement and commitment. Civilization had become a living, collaborative organism, and Marcus was its guiding force. The following cycles brought even greater challenges. New alien species arrived, some seeking cooperation, others testing the settlement's defenses. Marcus led negotiations, balancing diplomacy and strategy. He introduced joint projects, combining skills from different species to improve agriculture, energy, and defense systems. The settlement became a center of interstellar collaboration, a beacon demonstrating the power of intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. Marcus also focused on cultural development. He encouraged the creation of symbols, art, and written records. Knowledge was systematically stored, with instructions for cultivation, energy management, defense, and education carefully documented. The alien companions contributed their own ideas, creating new techniques and artistic expressions. Civilization had grown beyond mere survival. It had developed identity, culture, and shared purpose. Years passed. The settlement had become a sprawling network of gardens, shelters, and outposts, linked by energy grids and communication systems. Marcus's companions were no longer simply followers. They were independent thinkers, leaders, and teachers themselves. The principles Marcus had established had multiplied, spreading knowledge, culture, and skills throughout the growing community. Scythera was no longer a death world. It was a cradle of civilization. One day, the alien overseers returned for a final assessment. Marcus met them on the central ridge, overlooking the thriving settlements below. The overseers observed quietly, scanning structures, gardens, and the busy alien companions. Marcus gestured toward the energy grids, the irrigation systems, and the councils of companions managing resources. He demonstrated innovations, teaching methods and defense strategies. The overseers responded with subtle nods, patterns of light, and vibrations that Marcus interpreted as acknowledgement and approval. Marcus realized that he had achieved something extraordinary. Against impossible odds on a planet designed to kill, He had built civilization from scratch. He had survived, adapted, innovated, and taught. He had created a culture, a system of governance, and a thriving community capable of growth, learning, and cooperation. Zythera had been transformed, and humanity had proven its strength, ingenuity, and resilience. The overseers departed, leaving Marcus and his companions to continue their work. Their acknowledgement was more than recognition. It was a message to the galaxy. Humanity was capable of adapting, innovating, and thriving even in the most hostile conditions. Marcus knew that other species would come, some to learn, others perhaps to challenge, but he was ready. Civilization on Zythera was strong, resilient, and prepared for the future. Marcus walked among the gardens, checking energy grids, inspecting shelters, and observing his companions at work. The settlement was alive, a complex organism of cooperation, knowledge, and adaptation. He paused to watch a group of companions experimenting with a new irrigation technique, their movements precise and coordinated. Civilization was no longer a dream. It was reality, growing stronger with every passing cycle. He thought of the journey from the moment he woke on Zythera, alone, scared, and unprepared, to the thriving settlements before him. Every challenge, the storms, predators, scarcity, and isolation, had been overcome through intelligence, perseverance, and cooperation. Marcus smiled. He had not just survived a death world, he had turned it into a home, a hub of knowledge, and a beacon of human potential. As the twin suns set, casting long shadows over the settlements, Marcus stood on the highest ridge, gazing across the land he had transformed. Gardens flourished, shelters gleamed, and energy crystals pulsed softly with stored power. The alien companions moved with purpose and independence, a testament to the civilization they had built together. Marcus felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Zythera was no longer a death world. It was a place of life, learning, and hope, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when intelligence, determination, and cooperation were applied to the impossible. Marcus Vale, once a lone survivor, had become a pioneer, teacher, and architect of civilization. His legacy was secure, not just in structures or crops, but in the knowledge, culture, and spirit of the beings he had guided. The wind whispered through the jagged mountains, carrying the scent of fertile soil and thriving gardens. Marcus felt the pulse of life around him, the hum of energy grids, the chatter of alien companions, and the rhythm of a civilization that had begun from nothing. Humanity had proven itself on a death world, and Marcus knew that the lessons learned here would echo across the stars. With a final glance at the thriving settlements, Marcus smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ideas, and new growth. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of pride. Against impossible odds, he had turned survival into civilization. Zythera was alive, and so was the spirit of humanity. Marcus turned and walked back toward the central settlement, ready to continue his work. The civilization he had built was strong, adaptable, and capable of enduring whatever the galaxy might throw at it. He knew that one day, others would come, inspired by what had been achieved here, and Zythera would serve as a beacon of human ingenuity and perseverance for generations to come.